Hey, party people. Welcome to Watch Me Design a Fashion Collection, Season 2, Episode 2. Last time I went over and did a mind map for you all. I got this sketchbook. Well, it's a watercolor book from Moleskine. And so I took this one on my recent trip to Europe. I went to Berlin, London, and Edinburgh. So before I left, I transferred the mind map I did in episode 1 to the first pages of this sketchbook. And then while I was traveling around, I added all these random ideas as they came to me while I was traveling. So to go over some of the ideas that I had percolating in my brain, another P word, preposterous, percolating in my brain while I was traveling around. Okay, so we'll start here. Not common sense sort of section. Section 1, clothes half turned inside out, but artfully. I remember I was actually inspired by a TikTok I saw where this girl was trying to copy one of those, there are those women who do those really beautiful, artful, get ready with me TikToks. And she was trying to mimic them, but in a comical way. And she ended up half inside her clothes and half not. And it just looked funny, but also the way her shirt had draped over inside out looked really cool to me. Clothes that appear to be open, like flies and closures, but are not. Clothes that appear folded while getting ironed with pressed sections of irregular origami and then possibly laminated to look like that. Have you ever ironed your clothes and then you got it smooth on one side and then you realize on the other side that you had ironed a whole crease into it? Something like that, okay? Section 2, where I was expanding upon the absurd, ridiculous, foolish, ludicrous, farcical, this sort of metallic brocade studded with pearls, jewels, and Monopoly game pieces. So where I wanted the beading placement to be absurd and in places they are typically not, like your crotch, your armpits, and your toes. If you're OG and you know how much I don't like it when design focuses on the crotch, you'll be howling at this. I just like the idea of armpit beading, okay. And then overalls and suspenders being too long with drooping fronts and backs. Chain suspenders on skirts that start mid-thigh. So like this, I sometimes really enjoy airplane rides for what it does for my creativity. If you watch my series on the football padding inspired collection, where I turn it into a series all about how to illustrate a multi-figure composition, that whole collection was designed on one flight. Sometimes it's that restriction of being forced to sit down. You can't go anywhere. You don't have internet. And so you have to do something else. And sometimes it's those restrictions and restraints that inspire the most creativity. A lot of the time people think, oh, I can do whatever I want. It's going to be great. And then you're like, okay, I could do whatever I want. And nothing is coming to me because just too many options. And I'm not the only designer who thinks this. Sometimes the greatest ideas come from being told you have to stick to these parameters. You need to push yourself within these parameters. And so, not to say you got to get on a plane somewhere to inspire creativity, but just something to think about, okay? And so, in my mind, all these extra doodles, they happened throughout the course of the trip, but this was the first thing I thought of, this idea of a deflated, upside down hot air balloon, okay? So when I got home, these were the kinds of things I was thinking about, upside down hot air balloon, these sorts of shapes, but also deflated with the strings. These kinds of images were in my brain. And so I think I wanted this to be kind of that main silhouette that I play with. Inspired by an upside down or deflated hot air balloon, straps can be self fabric, ropes, sectioned with gold tubes, various chains, thick chains or multiple thin chains. And then, like, I was thinking, like, that original idea I had about the ball gown that was so big that it needed pallbearers, that I would have like extra sections that came out for people to carry. Varying hems, embellishments, fabrics, layers, possibly worn with tiny toy bikinis. And, like, these are very circusy colors, primary and secondary colors, super bright and vibrant. I feel like if I did that, it would just be too literal and it would be too circusy, and that's not really what I'm going for. So I'm still circling around that right preposterous color story. It's a full skirt that comes out and not tucked in like a balloon would, because then again, that is just too literal. I don't actually like when I finish the collection, I want people to think I can see the inspiration and not I can see the balloon. Still have not decided on a color story. I thank you for all the people who offered their ideas on a preposterous color story in the comments. I got a lot of comments on that and I love reading through them. I think the ones that were the most interesting to me was the things where many people said this idea of having some neutrals mixed in with like a highly like contrasty things, like a bunch of neons or like a bunch of pastels. And I'm really leaning towards that. I really like that concept. And I also like the concept of all white. There's so much going on right now that do we need another element like color, or would it just be chaos? Like, I'm having so much fun with the weird silhouettes and the weird add-ons and the embellishment and everything. And it's like, do we need color at this point? So number 3, we have the extravagant, excessive section. And then I was like, take this theme and move it all over the body. This whole idea of having so many ruffles, which is what I did, over here, that I want to play with some more. Shoulders, ruffles dripping down, making huge shoulders, tiny bra top or bikini hip ruffles, creating faux panniers. I was sketching this, but it occurs to me that this is sort of like a default sort of design for me. And that's why I don't love this. I like it because this is so my style of when I want to get into the extravagant ball gown sphere. Huge ball gowns is a love of mine. Military inspiration is a love of mine. Big collars, for some reason, I really love them. Like layers and layers of pleats and gathers and stuff. Those are also things that I love. And it's this like balance of trying to figure out whether they're just your defaults and now they're boring, or they're just part of your signature style. And those would be like your house codes, things that you use over and over again that people use to identify, what you're all about. Kind of like how, Chanel has her house codes. If you don't know what I'm talking about with house codes, go watch my brand aesthetics and house codes video. I'll link it below. But, it's always that balance of, is this my house codes or am I using it too much? But sometimes when you have ideas rattling around your brain, even if you're not satisfied with the way they're shaping out in your brain, it's still good to sketch them out or, do something about it so that they're not constantly bugging you. And it's good because I've stopped really thinking about this once I've sketched it out, because it's out there now. I don't have to remember it. I've put it down on paper. So my brain is like, oh, it's out in paper. You can stop trying to like hold on to the idea to remember it. And do you see what I'm talking about? But I had this idea of this kind of embellishment that looked like, all the medallions and medals and badges that military people earn and put on their chest when they're in full dress, and the epaulets, and then just like layers and layers. I'd mentioned something in my original mind map of like collars that were so ridiculous that they were covering the face. And this is like a collar that ended up being panniers and a huge train. So it's like coming from here, covering the face, wrapping around, and then just, and I wanted to do this thing where maybe the sleeves were also just, and not coming from the ends, like those big flared sleeves, but actually coming from the shoulder where it starts coming down and maybe even drapes down even more. And the more excessive and insane it started to look, the more I liked it. So I actually might play around with just this explosion sort of thing. Also, this idea of a hot air balloon that collapsed and deflated and just kind of fell on a person. And then the Marie Antoinette, but ridiculous cotton candy hair. But, you know, these things where I have these ideas that I like to leave some blanks so I could go in and come in with new ideas. You know, some people, when they do their sketchbooks, they like to do everything in chronological order so that they kind of have a timeline for their ideas. But I prefer to section off into ideas so that I can explore all my ideas, you know, or kind of explore the main ideas in one double truck. And then later on, if I want to refine this idea, I could do it on another section, but it's like developed here and then further developed elsewhere. Okay. The most excessive use of fabrics: rags made to ropes, ropes made into coils, coils up the legs, up the arms, etc. Extravagant rags are silk scraps, ropes looping and hanging and trailing. Okay. And then this was what I was thinking when it came to ropes. I was inspired by ropes. I was also on an airplane for this sketch, which I spilled water during turbulence. That was fun. Okay. Inspired by slack ropes made of twisted silk rags and scraps. So I had this idea of taking a bunch of scraps, or possibly, when you cut out pattern pieces out of a piece of fabric and you have all the pieces in between, to take those and twist the fabrics into silk rag scrap ropes, or possibly wrapped around real rope for the foundation feel and structure of a real rope, but using the fabric around it so that the colors and the textures match up with the rest of the collection. And to put these rope dresses together and possibly structured with some sort of corset lacing in the back. And, some of these sections where it's completely covered possibly would be structured with boning. So the whole thing is coming together somewhat. And another thing that could happen is the whole thing is structured in boning so that you see the boning underneath. And it's an obvious structural thing. That's another thing that I was playing with. I really love designing corsetry and making corsets and have done, and this whole idea of a very non-stereotypical corset. I might have to do the whole thing with a souffle, like a sheer net, where the corseting is laid on the net with the ropes on top. That sounds like a fun... I know that many of you want me to make one of the final designs of this collection at the end of this video series. I think that would be super fun to do, like a piece, a dress like this. Yeah, with made entirely of illusion or something stronger, something sheer, and then with the boning, and then, but deconstructed, so you see all of that, and then you see the ropes on top, and it's, I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. So of course I was playing around with the idea of coils of rope. So right now this is going around, so the top view would be coils of rope, but then you could have other pieces that look like sideways coils of rope, fabric draping off of coils of rope. I left this blank so I could play with more ideas along this theme. Over on number 4, deconstructed military influence, upcycled but sections left whole for recognizability with balloons and or flowers pouring out, kind of farcical representations of wounds that are gushing blood, but instead are gushing balloons or flowers. And then harnesses strapped to sections of the body with drapes, aka the deflated hot air balloon effect. So this is that kind of concept, the upside down, deflated hot air balloon with the toy bikini. And I left it as kind of bubbles because it's really about the concept right now. None of these designs do I plan on leaving it like this and moving. These are concept designs and not necessarily final designs for the collection. And then I had this idea of this like contrast of work and play, preposterous, that whole pompous windbag, military general, big mustache, like, I don't know, like making these connections in my brain. So I had this sort of military uniform and I had this kind of like half harness of silk ropes tied to various objects, balloons, scarves, toys, yo-yos, plastic fruit, I don't know, something really playful, really absurd, really in that weird, absurd realm. And again, like this and this, you know, when I'm playing around with concepts, and it's really about concepts, but it's an unconventional shape, I like to throw in some skin tone, like here and here, so you can kind of see where the design is and where it isn't. And then when I came home, I've always wanted to go on a hot air balloon. And so it is one of the many reasons why Turkey is on my travel bucket list. I'm dying to go. No one wants to go with me, so I have a feeling it's going to have to be a solo trip at some point, but I really want to go. And you know what's funny is I got invited. I don't really get invited to these influencer trips very often because I'm not like in on those email lists where, you know, because I'm not a beauty influencer. It's usually beauty and fashion influencers that tell people to buy more stuff, and that's not really me. But I did get an email from this plastic surgeon who does hair surgeries, hair transplant, like all kind of hair surgeries in Turkey. And they invited me on an influencer trip to come to Turkey and, you know, learn all about this surgeon, and they would pay for my flight and blah, 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 all this stuff. And honestly, I was tempted because, you know, Turkey's been on my bucket list for a long time. And I'm like, oh, could I just like go to, where is it, Cappadocia, where they do the hot air balloons and Turkish food is delicious. For those of you who know how I teach design process, where it's brand, inspiration, color, fabric, and then silhouettes. And you're like, Zoe, you're already doing silhouettes and you said to not do silhouettes. Yeah, I know. I'm still at the inspiration stage and I'm really having fun exploring the inspiration. I haven't really distilled my just random swimming pool of concepts right now into like a single design direction. I'm still at the phase. So on these pages, I want to explore some of the whole deflating and completely deflated shapes. Here, I want to explore some of the like coming up into the balloon shapes, these shapes that happen with the ropes, close-ups of carabiners, and if I want to play with that. I don't want actual carabiners, these, you know, these metal hook thingies in the designs. I don't want it to look too literal, but just kind of the mechanics and the shapes and possible concepts of closures and chains. I want to make things with your typical dressmaking materials, but also kind of get inspiration from these concepts and shapes and things. Okay. Still trying to stay away too much from like rainbow color, not so much the circus. I still want to keep things modern, like actual clothes, although, you know, some editorial pieces. I printed out, these are my croquis, of course, but you can get my croquis, my fashion figure templates at shop.zoehong.com. And they print out really light like this so that you can draw right on top and the body doesn't really kind of get in the way. at the end of the next episode, I hope to have kind of distilled the concept enough so that I have a concrete design direction. And this is important whether you're working for yourself or for a team. For a team, it's obvious, like you need to give a specific design direction so that they can help you develop a really beautiful collection. And even if you're working for yourself, sometimes you need that design direction concretely written down somewhere so that you don't start wandering off as you're working, so that you're staying focused to your original concept and things like that. So by then, I hope to have kind of more nailed down my design direction and decided on a color story. So tell me which way you're leaning on the color story. Do you think I should go with the whole contrasting neutrals meets neons, neutrals meets pastels, or all white? Let me know. Oh, by the way, this is a spring-summer collection. I should have told you that off the bat, but I hope it is more obvious that it is a spring-summer collection. You know, I love designing fall-winter. I love designing coats. Outerwear is my jam, and I love denim. So I was trying to like do something different and stay away from, you know, the things that I do often. So you tell me, what is your vote on the color story? I hope you're designing along with me at home. Keep updating me if you are. Tag me on Instagram if you are with your progress, and you know, subscribe, share, all those good things to show me love. And I'll talk to you soon.